Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. Today's video is all about SproutBox Gardens. It's a metal raised bed that's a Canadian company, and I'm going to review it for you today. I'm going to take you through a couple different topics, so I'm going to put timestamps below so that way you can get to the parts that interest you the most, or you're welcome to stay for the whole video. Let's get into it. So a quick overview, we've had our raised bed for a year now. This will be our second garden season with it. We were gifted this garden as part of their brand ambassador program. However, I am going to be as honest as possible with this review, so don't let that turn you away. So in this review, I'm going to take you through the very specific garden that we own, who SproutBox is, our experience building the garden, the cost of the raised bed, and our overall thoughts. So our garden is the 9-in-1 32-inch raised bed. And so the 9-in-1 means that you can build it in different shapes that they provide you on the website. We built ours in the 5x5 configuration, and I did that on purpose because it offered the most amount of square feet in a garden, and I wanted to get as much space as possible for planting my plants. This specific garden requires 2.5 cubic yards of soil in order to fill it. And I got it in the pampas color, which is a whitey beige color, because I thought that it was really unique compared to all of the other gardens on the market. So pros with this garden is that it has a very nice looking exterior having the color. I purposely got the 32-inch height because I like the idea of not having to bend over when I'm gardening, and it's expected to last a really long time. So some of the cons with my garden that I got is that this pampas white color gets really dirty. So when there's a big rainstorm and the soil gets kicked up from the raindrops, it makes the bottom of the garden really dirty and it's obvious. The 5x5 configuration that I built makes it really hard to reach the center of the garden because it's 32 inches high, and then you have to reach 2.5 feet into the middle of the garden. So it can be a little difficult to reach those plants that are in the middle. And because it fits 2.5 cubic yards of soil, it's really expensive to fill. We did try and follow a loose version of the hugelkultur method where we filled the bottom with a lot of branches that we had from maintaining the rest of our property, but it still required a lot of effort to fill it, a lot of cost, and because it's 32 inches high, you really had to shovel high up in order to get it into over the 32 inches and into it. So SproutBox Garden is a Canadian company. They were, from what I remember, one of the first raised bed companies that were made out of metal. I had seen a lot of them in America, but there hadn't been anything come to Canada until SproutBox came. They were one of the first where you could get access to them really easily. So these raised beds are made out of alu zinc magnesium steel, and they're meant to last a long time. The website says around 20 years. So once you build one, you don't have to worry about it for quite a long time. So in addition to the frame, all of the hardware is also made out of stainless steel, which is a really nice feature. And when it comes time to replace these gardens, they're meant to be 100% recyclable. So when we first received our garden, I was surprised by how small the box was, considering how large the garden would be. It shipped in quite a small box, but was really heavy. So that was the first thing. Hopefully you have help with someone to be able to move the box because it was really difficult to move on my own. When I opened the box, all of the metal panels for the sides were included in it, a tension rod for the center of the garden, and then all of the hardware such as the screws, washers, and the nuts were included. And of course, instructions. So the very first step was to remove everything from the box, and then I took inventory of it to make sure that all of the pieces were there, and then I laid them out in the configuration that I wanted to build. I did build this garden by myself, and so one of the things that I do like about it was that I was able to build it alone and I didn't need any help. However, with the 32-inch bed, it was a little difficult to do alone because as it got bigger, you had to try and get the bolts at the bottom of the panel while you were on one side of it. So you were kind of on both sides of the garden, and it did make it a little difficult for the pieces to not fall over as you were doing it. One of the items in the instructions that I didn't follow was to build this on level ground. I did build it outside because where else would I? I should have built it on my driveway to make it easier, but I built it in my backyard on very uneven ground, and so it did make it a little bit more difficult to do it that way. So after taking inventory and laying out the pieces, I had to take the plastic film off of each of the panels, and it was literally the worst job ever.
Oh, this is not fun to do.
It took me hours to do, and as I was peeling the plastic film, it kept ripping into different pieces, so then I had to slowly pick at it again. It took me so long. There was a lot of grumbling and swear words coming out of me. It was definitely my least favorite. I think for me, one of the parts that I didn't like about it was that they have everything wrapped in cardboard, and then it's meant to be a 20-year garden, but then by the time you were done peeling all the plastic film off of the pieces, there was a lot of garbage left over. And I get that they were putting it on there to protect the coloring from it, but I definitely would have rather had the panels come without the plastic film on it. So the next step was to put the panels together. That was fairly easy to do. All you have to do is put in the screws, the washers, and the nuts. It was quite simple. It just made it difficult doing it alone, again, because the 32-inch panels are quite large. So if you're going to get the 32-inch garden, I would recommend having a second person with you. But if you are getting either of the two shorter options, you should easily be able to build this alone. So the one mistake that I did make was with the corner panels. I wasn't reading the instructions, and so by the time I had installed the corners, I realized that some of them overlapped on the outside of the wall panels, and some of them overlapped on the inside. And I wasn't sure if that would cause any structural issues with the garden, but it also didn't look good either, that the corners were all different. And so I did have to undo parts of the garden and rebuild it again, which was very annoying. But again, that was all my own fault. So once I installed all of the panels, I installed the tension rod in the middle. And so they give you 3 pieces, and it just depends on the size of the garden that you built if you need to use all 3 pieces or not. I did put mine in, and I don't know if I installed it correctly or not, but the tension rod does actually pull the walls in on my garden, and so I don't really like what that looks like. I thought that the tension rod would keep it pretty flush with the panels, but by the time it was done, they're kind of concave like this on each side, and so I really don't like the look of that. But it's not a huge deal. Once the garden is built, you put rubber edging along the top of it, so that way when you lean into it, it's comfortable. It was not too hard to install the rubber edging, but the corners were really difficult to do. I had a hard time putting the rubber banding around the edges, and because of the overlap, like when you had the 2 pieces, the rubber edging was really difficult to get over top of those corners, so I'm not sure I did them really well. However, I did get it on in the end, so it does look really good. Overall, it was a really straightforward build. The slowest and longest part of the build was peeling the plastic film off of it, but otherwise I built it in an afternoon by myself. For me, what sets SproutBox gardens apart from other raised beds in Canada is the color choices that exist. They have 3 colors right now, and also the configuration. Some of the other raised gardens that I've seen either on Amazon or other companies, they only have them coming in the typical steel color, or they're really small gardens like 2x3 gardens and can only be in one shape, versus SproutBox has so many different shapes where you can build a square, an L shape, they've got a clover. So there's a lot of different things that they offer. So when you buy from SproutBox, you can create a custom garden unlike anybody else. They also have this really amazing garden that's a massive semicircle where you could build like a fire pit in the middle of it. It's really beautiful. It is at the time right now one of their most expensive gardens that they sell, but if you have the budget and wanted to build an epic garden, that would be really amazing. Apart from the colors and the shapes, they actually offer gardens in 3 different heights. So you can get an 8-inch garden, a 17-inch garden, or the 32-inch. I love that there's flexibility in the color, the shape, and the height of it. So you really can customize to exactly what you need. Overall, I think that is the strongest suit of SproutBox Garden, is the variability between the size, the height, and the color. Again, because you can build such a custom garden, that is really where they excel above all of the other raised bed gardens. So now you may be wondering about the cost of these gardens. And so we need to discuss both the cost of the garden bed, but also the soil that goes in it, because you will need to, of course, fill your gardens. So these gardens range in price from $80 at the lowest to $1,200 at the highest. This is at the time of recording this video. These prices exist, but who knows what they're going to bring out in the future. The highest garden, the $1,200 one, is that semicircle garden that I told you about. It's really cool and really large, and so that is why it comes with that price tag. The average price of their gardens will range between $300 and $500 per garden. So these gardens are bottomless, which means that you build the side panels and then just drop it down onto your yard or allotment, wherever you're building it. So when you're filling up your garden, there's no middle area where you start to fill it up from. It's right from the ground all the way up. So with the 32-inch garden, I had to fill 32 inches worth of soil by 5 by 5, which is where the 2.5 cubic yards come from. If you are using the 17 or the 32-inch, I recommend filling the bottom with some logs or tree trunks just to help take up some space. With the 8-inch one, you don't necessarily need to do that. So because of the 32-inch being so large, I did need to technically have 2.5 cubic yards of soil, but that could get really expensive. And of course, it requires a ton of work. So this is why I recommend filling the bottom up with some trunks and branches into it. For whichever garden you're choosing to buy, they will have on their website how many cubic yards of soil is required to fill it. So I highly recommend looking at this number and then finding a local dealer for soil and determining how much the cost is so you can properly budget for both the garden and the soil that it will take to fill it up. You're going to need a shovel and a wheelbarrow. So if you don't have those tools, you have to make sure to budget in that cost as well, because most bulk soils will be dropped on your driveway and you will have to fill it in place. One last item to note is that soil does settle over the winter, so you will have to be prepared to get more soil in the spring. It is both good practice to fill up your gardens with fresh soil every season, but also because the soil sinks, you're going to have to buy some anyway. So make sure that you're going to budget for the next season to get more soil to help top up the gardens. So our overall experience with our SproutBox, it has been positive. We've had it for just over a year now, and it looks as brand new as the day that we bought it. I do regret building it in the 5x5 configuration though, because of how awkward it is to reach to the center of the garden. I hesitate to rebuild it because I have to remove 2.5 cubic yards of soil out of the garden and then take it apart and rebuild it, but I am contemplating doing that. I wish I had spent more time thinking about the configuration and how usable it was, and not quite just about what the growing space was. But when I did build my garden, I didn't have any other gardens in this the house that I live in, so I just wanted to get the maximum amount of growing space, but I wouldn't recommend the 5x5 configuration at the 32-inch height. So the one thing that I'm looking forward to with my SproutBox is the longevity. For 20 years, I don't have to worry about my garden rotting or looking bad. I am excited that I don't have to worry about it, except for if I choose to change the configuration myself. Otherwise, it'll just stay in place happily. Even when I mowed the lawn and weed whacked around it, it didn't look like it ripped any of the paint off, or if it had, I can't see it from standing level. So as far as I can tell, none of the color came off of the panels while I was maintaining the lawn around it, which I really like. So I just have one SproutBox garden, and then I have wood beds around it. And I would say that one of the benefits of SproutBox is if you own multiple of them, I think they look a lot better as a group. And because I just have one colored metal bed around a bunch of wood beds, it doesn't look quite as nice as the pictures that you see where people have an entire group of metal raised beds together. So I do love my SproutBox, but it does look a little out of place beside my wood raised beds. So I would recommend kind of going all in with it, or else choosing to go with wood beds. So the final question I want to cover is, are they worth their money? And so my response to that is, it depends. If you are looking for a very specific garden aesthetic, then SproutBox is the right way to go. Because of the color choices, the configurations, the shapes, the heights, you can build a beautiful custom raised bed garden in your backyard with SproutBox, which you can't find with many other companies in Canada. And they'll last you a lifetime, which I absolutely love. And I love the fact that they are recyclable when you're done with them. If your goal with your garden is budget, then I don't think that SproutBox is the right choice for you. SproutBox is really beautiful, and an upfront investment for long term to make custom beautiful gardens. But if you have a specific budget in mind, then SproutBox might not be the choice for you. You might be better off going with wood raised beds, or there are some smaller companies in Canada that sell metal raised beds for a lower price, but they do only come in the color of steel and are smaller configurations. So it really just depends on what your goals are with your garden. And that's everything. I hope you enjoyed this review and you got some great information out of it. If you enjoyed this video, you can give it a thumbs up, and thank you so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.